typically wait till after Labor.
Yeah, that's probably the right way to do it. So we actually start teaching on the 16th. I've got a few Monday, Wednesday classes, but I'm prepped and ready to go pretty much. So this is going to
Nice.
be fun. I got to talk with a
Yeah.
friend here and get to wind into the semester here on a topic that I love to get into with my students. So I want to go ahead and introduce my friend and guest today. And we're approaching episode 30 for Mythic Mission, which is nuts because it's been 7 months. And I never thought I'd be at this point by now. I got a lot of fantastic guests. All of them are wonderful guests. Some are friends, some are new friends. And we've had some really famous scholars on the show sharing what they love. And I've got a topic that's close to my heart that we have Tim on the show here to talk to us about today. So I'm feeling very blessed and very grateful that Mythic Mission is doing so well. And I'm thankful for people watching and listening. And if you're supporting the show, we appreciate you. And let us know if you have any questions throughout the show. You can put them in the Facebook live chat. I'll try to check them periodically, especially towards the end. And as always, thanks for tuning in if you are on your Monday. And I've been busy lately, man. Tim, we've had a couple of interviews back to back. This is the busiest I've been probably all summer.
Oh, man. Well, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. It's great to have you on. So let me go ahead and tell people who you are. And, I kind of thought about some of the titles, but I came up with a somewhat nerdy one for episode number 28 of Mythic Mission, Apologists Assemble.
Okay.
So,
hey, yes. Perfect.
That'll work.
Perfect. Yes.
So this is my interview with my friend, Tim Fox. And Timothy Fox has an MA in Christian Apologetics from Biola University. He loves to talk about apologetics, theology, superheroes, and Star Wars, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point, especially how to use story to explain the Christian worldview. Tim blogs for FreeThinking Ministries and for Summit Ministries Reflect Pop Culture blog. He lives in Long Island, New York with his wife and 2 children. So Tim, thanks again for joining us today on a Monday.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And I'm going to post the links. And if you have any other links you want me to share, they'll be in the show notes for today. The most recent article you wrote, which I know you posted on Facebook on the Loki Disney Plus TV show, really excellent article. I saw a lot of people were commenting on that, so we'll make sure people have access to that.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I guess kind of we could start with how you became a Christian, but I'm trying to remember, how did we first met? It was, I think, a comment I posted something on some group and you made a comment about my book.
Yeah.
Hooked up in the comments section pretty much on Facebook.
Yeah. So I love the Naked Bible podcast with Michael Heiser.
That's
it. And he's had some various people on, some that didn't quite seem to fit his theme, but suddenly once you listen to the interview, you realize, oh, this really does fit the theme of divine counsel and whatnot.
Yeah.
So you were on as a guest promoting your book.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And I was like, oh wow, this seems really interesting. I love Tolkien. I was reading more things about Tolkien and his, the Christian influences and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And then just hearing about your book, The Good News of the Return of the King, now available.
Thanks, man.
And I was like, all right. So as soon as the podcast was done, it went on my Christmas list.
That's
so
awesome.
I got it for Christmas. And then it was shortly after you posted something in the Christian Apologetics Alliance, just like, oh, hey, I'm like Jahofke. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And then I was like, hey, is this you? And I posted a picture of me holding your book in front of my Christmas tree.
Yes,
and
that's
like,
it.
oh. I was like, I'm loving it. So
that's awesome.
That's how we connected.
Yeah. And, it's great because I know a lot of people give Facebook flack, but, friendships start from small beginnings sometimes. And even, social media is redeemable. There's a lot of great features. I mean, just what we're using right now is fantastic. To be able in a few clicks to share this with people, it's wonderful. And, COVID has cut people off from each other. So it's wonderful to make new friends and have this, way to connect. So it's great. And thanks for reading my book and for writing about it. Yeah, really means a lot. And it was a great way to meet. So yeah, thanks for telling us the story. And speaking of stories, we've all got one. I think a lot of people expect Christians to always have these bombastic conversion stories. And as I've said on a couple of interviews I've been on, like Mike Heiser and others, I don't have that bolt of lightning out of the sky conversion story. I don't know what yours is like. Do you feel like telling us about that for a few minutes, and we can segue into what you're doing these days and where you're
Yeah, I mean,
writing? Yeah.
yeah, I don't have a conversion story. I'm a pastor's kid, born and raised in church. So,
Okay.
I was kind of assimilated into it.
Mm,
I've always believed it. I never really questioned it.
mhm,
But, I guess even though I was always there, I always felt like an outsider simply
mm,
because my interests weren't the same as everyone else. Um, my dad, his church is Pentecostal. And I know when people hear that, they're like, oh, those people.
yeah.
Trust me, it wasn't people swinging from the chandeliers and such. It was just life. That's it. That's all it was. It
Yeah.
was just lively. People, they sing loud, they wave their hands and whatnot. And me, I've always been an introvert. That's me. I just like, just sit and read, be quiet and whatnot. That's just me. So I
Yeah.
always felt like, all right, this really isn't for me. I mean, I believed it, but
Yeah.
church wasn't for me.
Right.
And then one day, but I was always committed. I was always working in Sunday school and whatnot. And then one day I overheard a friend of mine just talking apologetics. I don't remember
Mm,
exactly, what he was talking about, but I was like, wait, what are you talking about? And I just started grilling him. And it was
yeah.
just really a light bulb went off. Like, this is it. This is where I fit in. There is an intellectual side of Christianity.
Yeah.
I have my undergrad in computer science. I worked as a programmer for maybe 10 years.
Oh,
And then I
cool.
switched over to, I got a master's degree in math education. So I've been teaching math for now another 10 years.
Oh.
So that's me. I'm more of a logic and reason and rationality type of person. But I always thought that religion was just kind of that thing that you believe.
Sure.
So, and I know that that's a problem nowadays in the church. You
Mm,
hear it called a lot of different things like the sacred secular split.
mhm,
Church is the thing you do for an hour on Sunday, and then the rest of the
mhm.
week is, life. But then just coming to realize that, like everything is immersed in the Christian worldview.
Right.
Christianity applies to everything. So then once I discovered apologetics, I just started devouring anything I could. My favorite apologist, William Lane Craig. I love
Mm,
Greg Koukl from Stand to Reason,
me
and
too.
just anything that I could. Um, and then it was shortly after I graduated with my master's from math.
Mhm.
And then I get married. And then as soon as I'm done, I don't even think, it might not have even been in that order. I
Yeah.
might have got graduated. I might have gotten married and then graduated. I don't
Yeah.
even remember. It's all a blur. But as
It's
soon
all
as I
good.
finished my one master's, I told my wife, I'm like, I'm really into this apologetics thing. And, I discovered Biola University through, Bill Craig and Greg Koukl talking about it on their podcast
Mhm.
and just looking into the program. And I was like, this is something I really think that I want to do.
Mm,
I love education. I knew that I could just go pick up some books and read and study on my own, but it's not the same as a formal education where you're being forced to read things that you wouldn't choose to read or study things that you wouldn't choose to read and then make sure it's formal and structured. And it was the best decision of my life, aside from marrying my wife, of course.
of course. Yeah.
But it was just such a fantastic decision because it's all about the connections. I learned a lot
Mhm.
of great content, but really my education was mostly about the connections that I made.
Yeah.
And that'll lead into what I do now.
Yeah.
So
Please.
one of my classmates was Tim Stratton.
Mhm.
So yeah, we connected instantly. We both love superheroes and Star Wars and William Lane Craig.
Yeah.
So as soon as we graduated at the same time. He started a ministry, FreeThinking Ministries, and he's like, "All right, Fox, you got to come write with me." So then I started blogging with him. We're always writing about superheroes, Star Wars, theology, all the nerdy stuff that we like.
Love it.
Yeah, and then another connection that I made was with the teacher, Sean McDowell.
Mhm.
Hopefully everyone's familiar with the McDowell name, either
Yep.
Josh or Sean. But
Yep.
yeah, I connected with him. I guess he liked my writing because he's asked me to help him out on some writing projects.
That's
I've
awesome.
had the opportunity to write, be a part of a lot of really cool projects with him. And then he's the one who hooked me up with Summit Ministries,
Mhm.
writing for their Reflect blog, which is just a pop culture, just really finding the worldview themes in various pop culture, whether it's music, movie, television shows, just important stuff, just to understand all of the worldview behind what we're listening to, what we're watching. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just been a blessing. Things that have kind of fallen into my lap, and
That's
then
great.
eventually I got connected through Facebook, and now here we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. Those are some fantastic communities you're a part of. And I didn't know about
Yeah,
the math background. Thanks for sharing that with me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's what really, yeah, because once I discovered apologetics, that really bridged everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just the logic, and then understanding that no, faith isn't just blind, something that you
No.
simply believe. It's all works together. And that's when it
Yeah.
really just, the light bulb went off. I'm like, all right, this is it. This is what I got to do.
I really feel like we should mention something about the sacred secular split again, because that's super
Yeah.
important. When I teach my students about it, we talk about Kant's philosophy and the difference between the phenomenal and the noumenal, the world
Yeah.
as it is and how as it really is. Kant cut us off from knowing the world actually as it
Yeah.
is, or he posited that we can't really know it. And so truth, as Francis Schaeffer famously used that analogy that Nancy Piercy has also written about from her
Yes.
connection to him, about the
Yeah.
two stories, that
Right.
things that are objectively true, that are factual, things like science and politics and economics, and things that are rational and provable and empirical, things we can know through our senses. But things
Yeah.
like religion, mythology, what we do,
Yeah.
doesn't actually tell us truth about the world. You see, that's all basically
Yeah.
subjective. It's
Right.
what you believe is equated with what you feel to be
Yeah.
true, and your truth,
Yeah.
Tim, is different from my truth. So for those of you that know about this sacred secular split that are listening, some of you don't, that's a quick breakdown, but
Mhm.
the problems here are legion, and obviously there's a lot of circular logic at work here.
Right.
How would we know that we can't know the world as it really is, first of all?
Yeah.
Second of
Yeah.
all, who says, I mean, the person positing the sacred secular split, right? You
Yeah.
say that we can, well, religion is not true, or it's just true for you, but
Yeah.
science is true for everybody. I mean, who makes that
Yeah.
decision? That seems like a pretty, so
Yeah.
maybe we should comment a little further, because this gets into the arts, and you know a lot of people might see what we do as a waste of time because of this.
Yeah.
So any
Yeah.
comments you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important things, I learned in my studies is that all truth is God's truth. And
Yeah.
there is no division. It's just God, the Christian worldview influences and informs everything. I took a cultural apologetics class with John Mark Reynolds.
Hmm.
I forget where he's teaching now, but yeah, I mean, it was one of those classes where I was like, all right, I'm not really sure about this. We had to read this tome of a book by Jacques Barzun, From Dawn to Decadence.
I've read it. Yeah.
And I'm reading it. I'm like, why are we reading this? But you just see the little ways that secularism kind of creeps in and starts chipping away at the Christian foundation. I mean, nowadays our world is just dismissing all notions of truth. You hear people talking about lived truth, lived experience, and that's supposed to, trump objective truth. People saying there is no objective truth,
Right.
which is an objective truth claim.
Exactly.
Which is so ironic. Like you were saying a moment
Yeah.
ago, people making these statements about reality. Well, we can't know reality. It's like, well, then how do you know that?
Exactly.
Somehow there are these sages or these gurus that are making these rules up for everyone. It's like, but that doesn't apply to you then, does it? Because if
Right.
so, I can disregard everything that you're saying.
Hmm.
So
Well said.
yeah.
I just saw Ben Witherington. I picked up a quote from, I think it was in Brian Godawa's book. He's got many books. I can't remember which of his, might have been Hollywood and Worldviews, whatever the name of the book is. I don't have it in front of me, but in one of the footnotes, he had cited Ben Witherington, and there's this great quote. So I think that's step one of kind of addressing the sacred secular split. But then for those who might wonder, if all truth is God's truth, well, how can we make Christianity make sense in various contexts? There seems to be too much diversity out there, and how can Christianity really make sense of it all? This really popped off the page this morning for me. Arguments are only persuasive, Witherington says, if they work within the plausibility structure existing in the mind of the hearers. Now, this was in reference to Acts 17, which is a great example of not only cultural apologetics, but addressing a number of things like the sacred secular split. A plausibility structure is something like a worldview. It's, you've got to fit it into somebody's story and the way that they perceive, understand, experience, and process the world. And so I don't think, people, I'm not saying people are thinking this as they're listening, but if you are, that's a key insight to how you can take Christianity and make it make sense within various different experiences of the world. So I think that's an important thing to mention at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I look at myself like a cultural missionary, because a lot of these phrases like contextualization, they're missionary terms where if someone's going to some other country, they need to understand that culture and how to apply the gospel to that culture. Maybe they have, stories within their culture. They have certain values and beliefs, and you have to figure out, all right, how do I bridge the gap to speak to this other people group that, is completely foreign to me? That's really what we've been doing for the last 2,000 years as Christians. You're taking the gospel and then you're finding a way to present it to a new generation, to a new culture. The gospel doesn't change, but the way we communicate it, the types of illustrations that we use, the connections that we make. And that's what we're doing through pop culture. You did it through Tolkien in your book. I'm talking about superheroes and Star Wars and whatnot.
Yeah.
And it seems silly. It can seem silly at first glance. Like, seriously, you're really trying to make a case, but that's how we learn. We learn through story. Just thinking about, you teach your kids about like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. That's a story, and it's trying to explain the fact, like, look, you can't tell these little lies just to give you attention, because then when something bad really happens, no one's going to believe you. So we still do it all the time. We use stories to teach truth. That's what Jesus did. He could have just rattled off a list of rules, do this, don't do that. He certainly did, but then he told a story to illustrate it. Exactly. So that's the power of story. That's why we need to use stories. It's contextualization. It's all in it together. And let's face it, someone's going to have their story told. Yeah. Is it going to be the Christian or is it going to be the non-Christian? So we need to know how to parse all of that out.
Amen to that. And I would say another big scholar, you may or may not have read Alistair E. McGrath's books on this subject. He's got a book called If I Had Lunch with C.S. Lewis, which I love. He's got another one called Narrative Apologetics, which you'd really appreciate. And he talks about the importance of this. Everyone, there's not a single person who doesn't have a story. We all have a story. We all have our individual stories, but we all live within a story that makes sense of the world around us. And if you're going to have a good story, I think one of the keys is it's got to make sense of all these other stories, and McGrath makes the case that Lewis does this best in the Narnia books. And he uses this great example. This will kind of be our platform into talking about one of our main subjects today, Tim. When the Pevensey children first encounter Narnia, they hear different narratives about the White Witch and about Aslan, and they hear these different perspectives. But controlling all those other little stories they start hearing, they start to see this major theme emerge where Aslan is tying everything together. And he likens that to the Christian story, its ability to take all the other stories and weave them into its own. And I think this goes for anybody. If you're a Hindu, if you're an atheist, if you're a Buddhist, a Muslim, your story has to make sense of the world, but it's also got to make sense of other stories, because not everybody believes the same way you do. So it's got to make sense of that. Yeah. So I guess, obviously you write for these blogs and you do a lot of writing about not only, you include academic research, but some of your own personal insights. So the next kind of big subject is, how are you implementing apologetics in your day-to-day? And then we'll start talking about myth and story a little bit more, because I want to push that a little further, because we've just started to talk about it.
So based on, whoever is listening, who's ever watching, everybody has a different idea of what apologetics is. Some people may have never heard of it before. Basically, it's just the study. It's a subject where we're simply learning how to defend the Christian faith, and that's it. Applying reason to our faith and whatnot. So it's just defending the Christian faith. That's what apologetics is. Some people might have the mentality like, oh, all right, so you're fighting people all day, or you're the kind of guys who are debating Richard Dawkins or whatnot. And certainly there are the ones who are debating on college campuses. There are those who are writing the books, making the podcasts, YouTube videos. But every Christian really is called to be an apologist. 1 Peter 3:15, always be prepared to give a defense for the faith that is within you. Do it with gentleness and respect, which is the part that a lot of people leave out. Yeah. But every Christian is called to defend what they believe in some fashion. So, even if you've never read a single apologetics book, you are an apologist in that you're defending what you believe. Yeah. You read something online on social media and somebody posts something that just doesn't jive with your worldview. It's like, no, that's not how God's world works. You're engaging in apologetics. If you have an atheist telling you, no, there is no God, that's ridiculous, you believe in a sky fairy, and you engage that person, you are doing apologetics. If you're reading a book by an alleged Christian author and they start giving out some doctrines that's wild and off the wall, that's apologetics. So it's something that's just a basic part of Christianity. Sometimes it gets marginalized into its own little corner, right? But it's really something that should be immersed in our everything as far as Christians. So as far as how I use it on the day-to-day, I mean, that's something that I would really have to stop to think about, because it comes naturally to me now. I'm always thinking in those categories simply because I study it so much. The same way that somebody, might just, spout pop references all the time,
Hmm.
because they love, Star Wars or superheroes. They're always thinking in terms of pop culture references. So,
Exactly.
no, I'm not debating people online and whatnot, but I'm just kind of keeping my eyes and ears out, listening for falsehoods.
Hmm.
I'm writing, of course. I am a teacher, so I lean towards teaching Christians, equipping Christians.
Hmm.
Um, well, my colleague, Tim Stratton, he wasn't, an amateur MMA fighter. So he's got, the fighting instinct that he wants to, go after atheists, because he started as a youth pastor and he
Wow.
saw atheists basically like wolves picking kids out from youth group,
Yeah.
just deconverted them, I should say, from
Sure.
Christianity. And he's like, I need to defend my kids.
Yeah.
So, he was a fighter, but I'm looking at it more from a teaching standpoint, that I want
Yeah.
to equip the church. I want to prevent your kids from leaving the church. And
Mm.
if I can give them some kind of a connection, hey, look, you just watched a superhero movie. This is how it connects to the gospel, to
Sure.
help them understand Christianity more fully. So I guess I do it informally, from
Yeah.
an education aspect, but
Yep.
yeah, that's just my thing.
That's fantastic. Thank you for speaking to that. A couple things that just popped up, some little tangents. Number one, I think you're right. Apologetics can get kind of pushed to the fringes, but it is central, not peripheral
Yeah.
to Christianity.
Yeah.
I would say number two, everyone is an apologist, for
Yes.
something. Like we were
Yeah.
talking about, everybody lives in a story. I mean, if you're an
Yeah.
atheist, that's your narrative. And it's
Yeah.
not just your narrative. There are millions of people around the world who think like that and think that that accurately corresponds to the way it actually is. So it's
Yeah.
not just true for you. You really think it's objectively true. We all think things are objectively true. Otherwise, it's not worth our time.
Right.
So, we're all, this is not, Tim and Mike talking about this fringe topic, defending our faith that you all think may not actually tell us anything about the way the world actually is.
Mhm.
We take this seriously, just like you take it seriously, whether it's pop culture references or, you're a believing Muslim or Buddhist, whatever. Everyone is an apologist for something.
Yeah.
I would say, here's what the voice on my shoulder, the devil, I suppose, in the old image is. People out there listening might think this is indoctrination. And I get that all the time. Now, in my classrooms, obviously, I'm not speaking because I teach for a secular university or college, rather. I'm not up there as a Christian. I'm obviously not converting my students. I'm not pushing it. But it's part of who I am. And so it comes out, indirectly, I suppose, like
Yeah.
anybody else. Um, but I guess what I was going to say is, and I kind of lost my train of thought there, but it'll probably come back to me. Oh, yeah, there
That
it is.
indoctrination.
Yeah, indoctrination. That's the key word. So, I've never had the charge. You're trying to do that. I mean, it's always I've always been able to present this material in a way that it isn't just reflective of one tradition. But there are people who think that, well, if you're a Christian, a kind of a special rule applies to you. Christians are the ones indoctrinating, but we're not. And so, have you ever heard that before? Like, I have gotten some pushback where Christians indoctrinate people, but everyone else doesn't do that. It's just Christians.
Yeah, well, of course, we need to define what the word indoctrination means.
Yes.
So what exactly does that mean? I know, leaning back, I lean hard on Greg Koukl, his book
Mhm.
Tactics. Anybody who's interested in apologetics or just having conversations in general, like
Mhm.
right now, politics is just destroying our country. So if you're going to have a conversation about anything, whether it's religious or not, you need to read Tactics. It will just teach you how to have good conversations with
Amen.
people.
Mhm.
So his one of his top questions is just, okay, well, just basically defining. Okay, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by indoctrination? You need to make sure that we've got the same definitions, because
Mhm.
we see this happening in our culture. I don't want to get too off topic into politics, but we
Right.
see suddenly nowadays all these words in our culture that are being redefined and given
Mm.
new definitions. Whether it's tolerance, that's a word that doesn't mean what it's always mean. Tolerance
Mm-mm.
now means the opposite of what it's always mean. So,
Exactly.
people are like, well, do you consider yourself to be a tolerant person? Like, all right, well, can you just tell me quickly what you think your definition of tolerance is
Right.
before I can answer your question? So just
Exactly.
making sure that we're on the same page. So what I think, of course, there isn't a questioner here that I can ask that, but
Yeah.
I would think that indoctrination means when you're just pressing something on people without allowing them to question it.
Right.
There's indoctrination and there's education.
Exactly.
Education should be a dialogue, or it should be presenting all of the options available and saying, look, these are the options. Not all of them are good. Not all
Mhm.
of them, I'm going to show you the one that I think is best, but I'm going to give you the full array of the options, and you
Mm-hmm.
can come to your own conclusions. This is what we should be doing as Christian parents, because let's
Yes.
face it, your kids are going to encounter some kind of false idea out there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot put them in a bubble. You can't
Nope.
protect them forever. Eventually, they're going to leave the house.
Yeah.
So we need to expose kids with ideas.
Yeah.
And I know some parents are scared about that. No, I don't want to risk harming them. I don't want to, because apologetics, it might be hard. They might not understand it. It might cause them to question their own faith. I don't want to be the one to do that. So then I compare that to sex. Parents, do you teach your kids about sex? Oh, no, that's weird. That's so icky. No, I don't want to be the one getting them to think about it. Well, guess what? Your kids are going to learn about sex somewhere. Yep. It's either going to be on YouTube, it's going to be on TikTok, it's going to be from their friends in school, or the backseat of their, first boyfriend's car. They're going to learn about it. Yep. So you need to expose it to them, teach them about it, because you love them. The world doesn't love them. No. And the same thing has to do with worldview, Christian worldview. Like, I love my kids, so I'm exposing them to everything that I can. Like, look, I want you to know the truth, but you need to know the falsehoods that try to spin the truth. And that's it. We need to make sure that people are equipped, that they understand when they hear a false idea, we don't run from it, but you expose it. You learn what it is. Again, not getting too much into politics, but, people are, like school, boards and stuff, they want to, ban certain kind of topics from being taught in the classroom.
Yes.
And I agree with some of it. But on the other hand, it's like, but we need to teach things. We need to expose them, not ban them.
Right.
We need to explain why, Nazism is evil. Why, things like that, why slavery is evil. So we do need to teach everything, but you don't have to affirm everything.
No.
So
that's really well said.
Yeah. So no, we are not indoctrinating, because I'm exposing my kids to everything. That's what we do. We like, look, these are the worldviews out there. Your kids are going to confront it. You need to teach them as soon as possible. Younger and younger, they're getting exposed to more and more.
I amen to that. And Sarah and I are doing the same thing. We're exposing our kids to a variety of different ideas. I think this is the problem. I think that people who maybe, let's say, non-Christians, people of different backgrounds, will make that charge against Christians because they're uncomfortable with what Christianity claims. Their worldview doesn't claim to be completely true. Well, yours does. So you're guilty of indoctrinating. I'm just educating my kids. It's a double standard, and it's based on really bad fallacious logic and bad philosophy. And you find that I can forgive people for that, but you gotta repent of it, in the sense of repentance. Just for those of you, again, defining our terms, metanoia in Greek means to make a turn, right? To turn around and change your thinking, because it's just not logical. Education from the Latin, right, is to draw out. And this is, I've gotten several comments over the years. I've been teaching 12 years at college now, almost 12 years. And what my students have always said is exactly what you said. Professor Jahoski exposes us to a variety of different ideas. He never says, pick this one. The guy repeats all the time, I'm trying to teach you how to think, not what to think. And that means I'm doing my job right. Is that, giving people the tools to figure this out for themselves, and along the way, giving them rules that are universal, that can help them, tell truth from a lie. And then not saying, and this is why you should pick this. No, you all now have the tools, figure it out. You've got to make a choice. And I think that's really what education needs to be, at home and in the classroom. So I'm so glad we went on that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, on the flip side though, I'm not teaching my kids that Christianity is just one option out of many. Christianity is the true worldview, because I believe that it matches reality. It explains reality as it is. I believe that Jesus did in fact rise from the dead. So, some people might be thinking, oh, all right, well, are you teaching that all religion are equally valid? No, that is absolutely not what we're doing. No. We do think that it's the best, just the same way. And, in history class, you're going to teach about, monarchy. You're going to teach about dictatorships and whatnot. And but when you get to democracy, you're not going to say, it's just one out of many. No, democracy is pretty good.
We like it here.
So yes, we're exposing to everything, but no, Christianity is true. And I'm teaching them that Christianity is true, but I'm also exposing them to all of the other ideas also, so they can understand what is false, why it's false.
Good clarification. And I don't want to get bogged down on this next point, so we'll move on. But we've talked about this on the show before, at least, some of my guests and I, but the religious pluralism option. And if you want, we can come back to it. Maybe if we have some time, we'll circle back to it. But there's this idea, okay, well, you're teaching them that this is the only completely true way of looking at the world, you're
Mhm.
exposing them to the other ideas. But it kind of sounds like you're really not, because ultimately you're saying only Christianity makes the most sense, and that's not tolerant. And there's that word again. I hear that all the
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
that's, again, there's some logic under there we can strip away,
Yeah.
and if we have time, let's
Yeah.
come back to it, because we're not being intolerant.
Yeah.
We're not doing something that you're not also doing. We're just doing
Yeah.
it with
Exactly.
Christianity. You're doing it with something
Exactly.
else, whether you
Yeah.
realize it or not.
Because they're going to tell me that, because I'm saying Christianity is the one true religion, and
Right.
then they're going to say back Christianity is not the one true religion. So they're all equally valid. So they're making a counterclaim to me. So
Yep.
they're still making a claim. Maybe
Exactly.
they don't see it, and that's the point of worldview training, to just
Exactly.
catch those inconsistencies.
Sure. And that's something we can work with people, and
Yeah.
again, it's like this view that all views are correct still
Yeah.
assumes that it corresponds to the way things are, but
Yeah.
most adherents of world religions aren't going to believe that. And if
Yeah.
you're trying to be tolerant and include as many people as possible, you've just alienated Muslims and Christians in your worldview by saying
Yeah.
all religions are equally true, because those religions
Yeah.
don't take that to be true.
Yeah.
So
Judaism. Yeah.
also, especially
Yeah.
Orthodox, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. So that's excellent. That's a great topic in and of itself. So let's start to get
Yeah.
into what you do. And I want to get into some rules for discernment, watching media,
Hmm.
maybe into this. So let me just preface it. I want to talk about story as it kind of manifests itself, myth as it
Hmm.
manifests itself in Marvel shows and
Hmm.
movies and other media. You mentioned Lord of the Rings.
Hmm.
And what I've asked him to come on the show today to do is to give us some rules about discerning the Christian worldview in these, media, but
Hmm.
also to kind of, is there a line? Is there something a Christian shouldn't watch?
Hmm.
And how much, sex or violence is too much or too little? I know there's probably not a perfect rule, but let's get into
Yeah.
that. So first, start with, how do you understand myth, and then we'll segue into some of the application.
Yeah. So one way of looking at myth is just, what's the story behind the story? What is the deeper story, that a story is based on, whether it's intentional or not? I think about how C.S. Lewis calls Christianity myth made fact, or
Mm,
something like that.
mhm,
And whenever people hear the word myth, they think it means false. Myth means untrue. So that's something that you kind of have to erase from people's minds. It's just a way of explaining reality.
mhm,
People will call, they'll think they're insulting Christianity by calling Christianity, or belief in God, whatever, like Hebrew myth or Israel myth. It's like, well,
mm.
that's actually is true. It is
Yeah,
accurate, because a
exactly.
myth is a way of understanding the world, explaining the world.
That's right.
Greek myths, Norse myths, they were just the way those people understood reality. They told it
Mm,
through story, but they're just showing the way they understand reality.
mhm,
But back to Lewis, when he said myth made fact, it's because he realized that the stories that he'd been, reading and studying his entire life were just shadows or projections of the one true story of Christianity.
mhm,
Whether it's every, dying and rising figures, every hero who sacrifices him or herself to save others is a pointer to Christ, whether it's in mythology or whether it's in, Avengers Endgame or something.
mm,
Everything is going to point to Christ, the one true story.
right.
But another definition struck me yesterday as I was going through this, and I want to get your ideas on it too. What you
Yeah,
think?
sure.
So how about this? So a myth is the acting out of a worldview. So while a worldview is a collection of ideas or framework, a myth is just those ideas being acted out simply in story or in reality. So what do
Yeah.
you think about that? You think that's good?
Yeah, I would say that's fantastic. I've had a guest on the show, Charlie W. Starr. Dr. Starr writes in one of his books, The Fawn's Bookshelf. He says that something along these lines. Myth is kind of concretized, if it's a word, fact. It is a special concrete experience, and so it is
Yeah.
all about the experience. I think he gives an example from Star Wars when Luke enters the cave. Was it Episode 5? And it has the vision of
Mhm.
Darth Vader,
Right.
and he says, I could explain this scene to my daughter, or I could just point to the experience, and,
Yes.
and that's exactly what you're getting at.
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
that that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's wordless communication. It's through images.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good
Very
stuff.
good.
And of course, in that experience, we get abstract ideas communicated to us, but it's kind of through the back door, as it were. It's indirect.
Yeah.
So he talks
Yeah.
about that too. So I like that, and I think We've mentioned Star Wars. You mentioned Endgame. I want to get your take on that film in particular.
Okay.
So we've got our kind of definition of myth, and there's obviously much more we could say, but
Yeah.
let's talk about some examples, film, media of different types, and then some rules for discernment, watching, listening, reading, etc. I don't know where you want to start.
Well, start with scripture.
Yeah.
First Thessalonians 5:21 tells us to test everything, hold on to the good. So it's got to be something that's constant, something that we're always just automatically doing. As we're talking, some of these terms, some of these words might seem like, oh, this is so much work. I really have to do this all the time. But, think about, your friends who are, maybe they're into sports and they've been watching sports for years, and they could just, come out with these facts and these statistics just off the top of their head. They never actually purposely sought to memorize it, but just from watching the game and learning the rules, it just kind of naturally comes to them. So that's the same thing we're doing here. As you read, as you learn, it's going to happen naturally. So I don't want this to sound intimidating, because that's how it happened to me. I would see people writing articles, doing these worldview assessments. I'm like, wow, that's so deep. How'd you find that? Yeah. And then the more I read, the more I realize, oh yeah, you understand worldview, then you simply apply it.
Right.
So yeah, we need to get into the habit of testing everything, period. Christians have been doing this forever. Growing up, Dungeons and Dragons was the devil. That was the evil. Did you encounter that? The satanic panic?
Yes, Harry Potter, especially. Yeah, going through college.
Yeah. Yep. I have a funny story about Harry Potter. I'll just share it. So my dad is a pastor. So then I was like, all right, I want to find out what all this deal is about Harry Potter. So I bought the books and I was reading them. My dad's like, oh, what's that about, Harry Potter? He's like, oh, can I read it? I was like, no, I'm not going to let you read my book, because I don't want you just to read it just so you can preach a sermon on how evil it was. I was kind of a jerk, I'll admit. Yeah. So then all of a sudden one day I see that my dad had his own copy. And then when he was done, he's like, oh, that was really good. I enjoyed it. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
So I was expecting some kind of lecture about it being evil, but yeah, that's different people have their different lines, and yeah, we could talk about that forever. The inconsistencies, but just different kind of music, like rock and roll music is all evil. It is all evil. It's all from the devil.
Moving your hips.
Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah. Just things. It could go on forever, but yeah, just testing everything.
Yeah.
Don't just throw a blanket over everything automatically. Of course, there are some things that we throw out automatically, whether it's pornography. I mean, it's not redeemable. It is evil.
No,
it is damaging to your mind, damaging to your soul. It's going to destroy your conscience. Or things that are just like, I call it gore porn, basically slasher films that are just, the whole point is just ripping people apart.
Yeah.
I know, I watched The Walking Dead for a while.
I did too.
I enjoyed it for a while, and then I realized that it was just numbing me. Like I would watch an episode on Sunday night, and then throughout the week, I would just be like, oh, that was rough. Because you're seeing human beings just torn apart. Literally. And you're just like, yeah, literally. And I remember there was this one scene where one of my favorite characters was just covered in zombies and ripped apart. And I was just like, it hurt it because, you grow to love these characters, and I had to quit watching because it reached the point of hopelessness. Because, in the first few seasons, there was hope. Like, all right, there's this catastrophe, but they're banding together and there's hope. So I was like, all right, I could get on board with this because, whether it's zombies or something else, there could be some kind of worldwide plague. We're living through one, the pandemic,
exactly.
I'm not quite the scale, but there could be nuclear destruction. So, all right, let's see how these people react. We can learn some things about ethics and whatnot. But then little by little, like anytime they found a safe haven, it would get destroyed. Anytime they would build something, it would get destroyed. They would meet some new people and they would get torn apart. And I'm like, why am I watching? It's hopeless.
I think
there is no hope.
And I just want to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I want to underline what you're saying. I think for me, the death of Noah, and then a little bit after that with the whole Negan introduction. That was tough.
That episode was the one I quit. When Negan. I'm like, I don't want to watch the next season just so I can see who gets their skull bashed in with.
Exactly.
I don't want to see that. Like I'm done with the show.
it was very traumatic, and
Yeah.
a part of it I couldn't escape. Again, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to jump in on this because I have a textbook for my Introduction to Humanities class somewhere around here, and in the happiness chapter of all places, or maybe it's life affirmation, they have like themes in the humanities. I think it's the
Yeah.
life affirmation chapter, which is really on death. They have a scene of Noah basically getting eaten alive. Spoiler alert, of
Yeah,
course.
that was a hard one to
That
watch
was,
because
he
he's
got,
pressed up against the glass door
yeah.
and you're just watching his face get ripped apart. I'm like,
Oh,
do I
yeah.
really enjoy what's enjoyable about this?
It
Like,
stayed with me the whole week. It was like,
yeah, yeah, it's a human being
yeah,
like created in the image of God being just torn apart like
yep,
a piece of meat. And I was
yep,
just like, this isn't how human beings ought to be treated. And that's
no,
the worldview aspect. Like,
yeah,
all right, what are we? We are human beings created in the image of God.
mm-hmm,
Don't treat people like that. That is not entertainment. And
no,
there's plenty of other movies where they're just filled with,
oh, so
graphic
bad.
rape and
Yeah,
torture, and just like, what is enjoyable about this? People are
I
like, oh, well,
know.
it's a good story. And that reminds me of, the man who got caught with a Playboy magazine. And he's like, oh,
Mm,
I just read the articles. It's
uh-huh.
like, oh, it's like, okay, well,
Sure you
maybe there is
do.
an article in it, but you could probably find that article somewhere else or read something else.
Most
The,
definitely.
the justification, like there has to be a line.
Yeah,
Next scripture, which I'll bring up, is Philippians
please.
4:8. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever
Mm,
is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things.
mm,
So I think those two scriptures are just good guidelines for what we consume.
yeah.
If we compare The Walking Dead to Lord of the Rings, Lord of the
Mm,
Rings is full of despair and
mm-hmm,
where they reach the point of hopelessness. It's like just when they get out of one thing, it's out of the frying pan into the fire.
mm-hmm.
And things just always get so bleak. But then there's always a glimmer of hope. Something will turn around, the catastrophe.
That's right.
Suddenly Gandalf will reappear out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm,
or something will happen where Tolkien shows the depths of the darkness of humanity, but then he shows the light. And
mm,
that was something I just never saw in The Walking Dead. There was no light. There was no redemption. It
agreed.
was just hopelessness and nihilism. And I was
Yeah,
just like, no, I can't do this anymore. And it's
I
just
couldn't
like a
either.
weight lifted off of me
Yeah,
when I
I,
read
I,
that.
I agree. I haven't once looked back, and I've seen advertisements, and I see that new episodes on Netflix, and
Yeah,
I'm like passing over it. And they have a
yeah,
preview of Rick from maybe the one of the first few episodes. He's riding through Atlanta on a horse,
yeah,
the tank scene, and I'm
yeah,
thinking this is when it was good, when
yeah,
there's a conflict, it's
yeah,
pressing in on us, but there's still hope. And
yes,
I think you described it just
yeah,
excellent description. It
yeah,
became increasingly nihilistic, and
yes,
it's not enough to justify watching the show that there are good character arcs,
yeah,
because I can get that kind of character development somewhere else, but the
yes,
core of
yes,
it is just destructive. I mean, it
yeah,
became that way. So
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah,
great,
yeah, because
great.
I had written an article for Summit on The Walking Dead.
Oh,
The
you did.
title, "We're All Infected," because
Mm,
that's how The Walking Dead takes a spin on the zombie trope. Where typically, to become a zombie, you're bitten by a zombie.
right.
Then eventually, but then they started realizing that no, it's every person is infected with this zombie virus or whatever it is. So whenever they die, no matter how they die, everyone comes back as a zombie. So there
Right.
really is no hope. So
No.
then I was like, you know what? This is like a link to original sin.
Mm,
How we all have this sin within us that we're all the walking dead.
mm,
You know, but the difference though with the Walking Dead, the show, is that there's no hope. There
right.
is no redemption. At least as Christians, we know that there is hope. There's no
Hmm.
cure. And I think I've read that the point of the show is that there may not ever be one. They
Hmm.
just need to learn to live with it. And I'm like,
That's
maybe the people who just often kill themselves have the right idea then. If you
yeah.
cannot escape this, then why bother living? But
Right.
that's not the Christian story. There
No.
is hope, there is redemption, and there is heaven.
Mm.
So yeah,
That's
I think
almost
that's
very Albert Camus, and almost like I think of the image of the myth of Sisyphus with that
yeah,
show and the direction that it headed. So I think that's a really great application for those of
yeah,
you watching. I know a lot of people in my circle too love The Walking Dead. I don't know if they're still watching it or not.
yeah,
I think it's coming up on its final season, or it started its final
yeah,
season.
yeah,
Anyway, yeah, and thank you for bringing scripture into this. So let's to finish out the show in the next few minutes, and if we go a little over an hour, I hope that's okay. I don't know, we're getting
yeah,
kind of close, but
Hey, I'm fine.
Okay, great, great. I want to talk some more about this in that same vein of rules of discernment, and I like that you've kind of laid out some guardrails already. You know, the what'd you call it, the slasher porn, really well said,
Yeah.
and actual porn. So we've got
Yeah.
some things kind of saying, okay, there's nothing redeemable here for a Christian if you're really trying to be pure and
Yeah.
you're trying to
Yeah.
be good.
Mhm.
We're not saying that if you've made a mistake in doing this that you're a bad person. There's
Yeah.
grace in the gospel. There's
Yeah.
that's a whole different conversation. But these are good guidance guardrails. So there
Yeah.
more of that, and then let's talk about maybe some Marvel films, or I don't know, maybe the
Sure.
Loki show, wherever you want to go
Sure.
with
Sure.
the
Yeah.
meander.
All right. So, I mean, again, people might be looking at this like, oh, you're just trying to find some way to, be a nerd and a Christian at the same time. It's like, okay, that is true.
True.
But again, story is so important.
Yeah.
Any kind of story, there might be some aspect of truth to it, some way to connect it to the Christian worldview.
Yeah.
And the higher the view you have of God and of God's story, you realize all truth is God's truth. So
Hmm.
there's going to be some bit of light everywhere. Of
Hmm.
course, there might be the things, once again, like, pornography or, gore porn, that's just so evil. That's such a perversion of God's world
Mm.
that, no, there's nothing redeemable here. But you can find something in anything, so long as it, again, isn't utterly sinful.
Sure.
But the Marvel universe, there's just so much great content, because you think about superheroes in general. They just, they're valorous, they're virtuous, they're strong, they're loyal, they're brave. So as it is, they illustrate virtue. We don't celebrate cowardice.
Mm-mm.
We don't celebrate weakness. So we already have a good starting point with superheroes. Yes, it's fantastical. They have all these other powers, but
Right.
you've already got a good starting point, because it's good versus evil.
Hmm.
Once again, if we look back at The Walking Dead, it's just survival. The
Hmm.
good people might be the ones, the compassionate ones are the ones being killed,
Mm.
because they're trusting people, you
Right.
know. But yeah,
Yeah,
there's
that's a good
just so
point.
much. There's so much in the MCU. I think there's the one line, though,
Mm.
from a movie that I think encapsulates the entirety of what it means to be a superhero, or really of just a hero in general. And it's in Doctor Strange. There's a scene, if anybody's unfamiliar with Doctor Strange, basically it's the wonderful Benedict Cumberbatch, and he plays this guy, Dr. Stephen Strange, and he's a legit doctor. He's a brain surgeon, I believe.
Mhm.
He's like the man, the best surgeon in the world, but he's completely selfish, narcissistic. He's just got multi-million-dollar home,
Mm.
he driving fast and whatnot, but then he gets into an accident and it just cripples him. Like, he can't use his hands, so he can't be who he was anymore. But
Yep.
he's this narcissistic jerk.
Yeah.
But then he's just seeking any way to get to heal himself so he can get back to his old life. So
Right.
again, he's still selfish. So then eventually he discovers his power. He starts becoming less selfish, and then he's got this scene with the Sorcerer Supreme, and
Mhm.
she's explained to him, look, this is why you're still wrong. This is everything wrong about you. You're still so selfish, this and that. She's like, but I'm going to tell you the most important thing that you need to understand. It's not about you. And like
Mm.
the camera, you see the camera angle moves, like the whole moment is just epic. It's not about you. And at that moment, that's when everything changes. When he becomes a superhero, when he
Yeah.
realized, this is not about me, it's
Mm.
about others. If you're going to be a doctor, you need to be in that to help people, not just to make money or be famous, whatever it is. Everything you do should be about helping others. And
Mm.
that's when Dr. Strange becomes a hero. He embodies the gospel, because to save the world, he locks himself into a time loop with this creature,
Mm.
and this creature kills him over and over and over and over, sacrificing himself, embodying the gospel.
Yeah.
So that's the heart of Christianity. It's not about you.
I love
Love
that.
God, love others. And
Yeah.
that theme occurs in every other movie. That's what sets the heroes apart from the villains. The
Mhm.
heroes, they sacrifice themselves, while the villains sacrifice others to get the gain whatever they want.
Yeah.
Um,
Great
and,
example.
and if you look at the teams, you look at the Avengers, Guardians of the
Mm.
Galaxy, they're not just a group of superheroes. They're considered themselves family.
Yeah.
They love each other. They support each other. And in Avengers Endgame, the motto was whatever it takes. But or was it Infinity War? I'm mixing them up. But one
Yeah.
of Cap's lines was, "We don't trade lives." Like, I'm
Right.
not going to sacrifice somebody else just to win the battle. I will sacrifice myself, but I'm not going to sacrifice someone else. And what does that say about abortion? What does that say about assisted suicide? Like, I'm going to kill grandma because she's making my life inconvenient. Like, all life is precious from conception until they are finally dead. I mean, the Avengers are extremely pro-life. It's Age of Ultron, I believe, was the first movie, a superhero movie, where you see them actively scanning buildings to see if there's anybody in there. Past superhero movies, they're just destroying buildings and blowing things up, throwing cars, but they're scanning to be sure that there's nobody in there. So, like, it's just so pro-life. It's so small c conservative. If you think about it, like Wanda Maximoff, I believe, she's considered to be the most powerful of all of the Avengers. What if you've watched WandaVision, you see, what does she really want? She doesn't want to rule the world. She just wants her family back. Now, she does it in a terrible, harmful way, but that's all she wanted. Captain America, what does he want? The whole Infinity Saga ends with him sharing a dance with his woman. That's all he wanted.
Simple.
It's just about the simple things. And I can't help be reminded of Thorin's final words to Bilbo. He tells him, go back to your books in your armchair, plant your trees, watch them grow. If more people valued home above gold, this world would be a merrier place. So, superhero movies and things like that, they're not about the capes and the costumes and the powers. They're about the basic, simple, ordinary things in life, the things that we should love. Don't pursue power because it will destroy you. Pursue what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful. That's how you win, and that's how you overcome. You sacrifice yourself. So there's just so much to parse from that.
You've got all these great images kind of flowing in here, and I'm remembering, you'll have to help me place the film just to add to that excellent list that you've just given. And of course, I appreciate the Hobbit quote there.
Oh, absolutely.
Got to have some Tolkien in there. There's a lot, maybe it's in Civil War, I can't recall, but Cap says something about planting himself like a tree or something and not moving. And it just really reminded me of that great Tony Stark, Iron Man on one side. And I read back in the day, I read the graphic novels, the Civil War graphic novels, and all the spin-offs with like the Punisher. And he's a great case study, by the way, the Punisher, for ethics and worldview. So maybe mention that. I know he's not in there's been some pretty gory Punisher films, but anyway, Cap says something like that, and that always stuck with me, that he was stubborn in a good way of like, I'm not going to sacrifice the truth because it hurts your feelings. And he wasn't doing it in a disrespectful way. It was just, I'm going to stand my ground no matter what on this thing. And of course, what Cap was all about, keeping the masks on in the comics, and maintaining that discretion with the identities because of family connections. Think of somebody like Spider-Man. Peter Parker's got Mary Jane, and I know that's changed over the years, but Aunt May. There was the argument there that we're doing that to protect those that we love, and it raises all sorts of great ethical dilemmas too, which are, I think, a lot of them are resolved in the gospel, but some of them are also mysterious, and that this is part of, I think, a great proof of, look, just because we can't explain or understand this dilemma richly and fully, it kind of actually gives credence to the idea of, we live in a fallen world and we need God. And I think the films point to that in some ways, especially the Civil War film. We can't save ourselves. We need salvation from the outside. So, anyway,
I found that Captain America quote because I had to, because it's just so fantastic for our culture. So it's in one of the comics. So he says, compromise where you can, where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say, no, you move. I mean, wow, we need that more than ever in our culture, because everything is just like, little by little, Christians in the church is more and more compromising with the world. And it's just like, we're hearing this from a comic book. We shouldn't have to hear this from a comic book.
No.
That should be coming out of the words of like your pastor on Sunday. And I'm not here to trash on pastors in general, but we need to remember that we need to plant our feet, at the river of life. You know, we need to understand the source of where truth comes from, and we need to dig in and not compromise.
Yep.
And that's it, you know, like that's Christianity, you
Yeah.
know, holds staying true to the truths one passed down, you know, like
Well
passing down
said.
truth, correcting monuments and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So that line comes directly from the comics, from Cap's comics too?
Yes.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, it's from the comics. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I remember when it
Awesome.
came out, that was just iconic. And it's just,
Yeah. Very
yeah.
cool. Well, okay, so with the time we have left, because I know there's so many different branching paths
Yeah.
we could take, and we went on some great tangents, I think, important ones. What else do you think we need to know in closing? And then any recommended reading for discernment in the arts? Anything you want us to know about what you've got going on?
Well, I think, yeah, we just need to study. We need to learn worldview for ourselves. I mean, you start just by everybody, even if you don't even know what the worldview is, everyone has a worldview. And what is a worldview? It's just literally your view of the world. How does it work? Everybody asks basic questions about reality, like, who am I? Where did I come from? What happens when I die? Everybody thinks about these things. Everybody has an answer. It might not be true, excuse me, it might not be coherent, but everybody has these same questions that they ask about themselves.
Yes.
As a Christian, those questions must be answered from a Christian worldview. So this is why we need to have a fully formed Christian worldview. So then once you experience a counterfeit, you recognize it, like, wait, that's not true. Or when you see something exemplified in a Marvel movie, like, oh yeah, you know, that matches reality. You know, when someone sacrifices themselves to save someone they love, that's a vision of the gospel. So just learning the Christian worldview, understanding those questions from the Christian worldview. So one book that I love, you know, Greg Koukl is one of my favorite apologists. He wrote a book called The Story of Reality. And I think you quote him in your book, right?
I
The
do.
Story of Reality.
Yep.
Yeah.
Frequently.
It's just a great overview of what Christianity teaches, our view of God, our view of humanity. You know, everything flows from that. So to understand, you know, where all that comes from. So in other words, we were talking about, all right, you know, why porn and gore porn is so evil. It's because of how human beings are simply being used as means to an end. How the way that they're being treated, how men and women are just being used as objects instead of being treated as imagers. How it's not reflecting sex appropriately. How people are in the slasher films, they're just being entertained by watching a human being created in the image of God just ripped apart. You're being entertained by that. This is to be contrasted with, let's say, Saving Private Ryan, where it begins with, I believe this is the movie, just men just being mowed down on the beach, watching them storm the beaches of Normandy. That is Saving Private Ryan, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, because I'm just making sure. Now, we are watching people being killed. But as you watch it, you're not saying, wow, this is so cool watching someone get their head blown off. No, you're watching saying, wow, war is terrible. What happened to these men is terrible. But wow, they were so brave. They were willing to sacrifice themselves to secure a better world. So it's how death is handled, how human beings are treated. They're not just being blown up like some action film. You're showing people death is terrible, but these men were brave in giving their lives. So again, it's understanding the value of humanity, because all these superheroes, all these movies, 99% of them are about human relationships, how we relate to each other. What is sexuality? What is good and evil? How ought we to treat each other? So, yeah, I know I'm going off on tangents again.
No, this is great. This is great.
Nancy Pearcey, read Nancy Pearcey, Total Truth, Finding Truth. Or just some other worldview. I know some ministries, they have Understanding the Faith, Understanding the Times. They've got a lot of worldview resources. You know, this may seem like a shameless plug, but definitely go to the Summit Ministries Reflect blog, because that's what we do. We look at things across pop culture, television, movies, music, and we find the worldview themes. So as you read these articles, then you'll learn how to do that for yourself. You'll see how the authors find the ideas, parse out the ideas, see how it compares and contrasts to Christianity and other worldviews. You see it in action, then you'll learn how to do it. So
learn by seeing and doing.
Yeah, and then just see how it happens in action.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have it in the show notes so people can go and see some of your articles, especially. I mean, it's you need to see it done, and to see
Yeah.
that it's not just reducing this is a concern I've heard from some people in my own book. You're just reducing the art form to a series of lessons. Well, we can do that, but at the end of the day, we have to understand no literature or media is self-interpreting. We have to interpret it. Even
Yeah.
Tolkien understood this, as I cite in my book. And so it's the way you do it. It's just like what you were talking about with the difference in violence on screen.
Yeah.
Of course, you should digest it as a story and swallow it as a story, and not just be there looking. I'm only watching Loki from the comfort of my couch so that I can see what it has to do with free will,
Yeah.
or I'm going in just to parse these ideas.
Yeah.
The art itself, the atmosphere is important, and you can still
Yeah.
retain that. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, you're going to think about it, and you're going to want to
Yeah.
think, how is this impacting me, and
Yeah.
what can I do with it? So it's not as if we're just out there ripping the art to shreds just to prove a
No.
point. The Bible already does that. The Bible already presents God's truth.
Yeah.
We don't have
Yeah.
to do that. We're
Yeah.
just trying to look at this intelligently so that we're not sitting back accidentally swallowing gnats with our food, bad stuff,
Yeah.
by not being uncritical and uncritically reflective. So
Yeah.
I know that that's important. Yeah,
Yeah, because people talk about what they love anyway.
exactly.
Like whether it's sports, people are going to talk about the plays of the week all week. You're going to talk about your favorite TV show. Oh, can you believe what happened on The Bachelor? People are going to talk about what happened on the show.
Yeah.
So why not talk about it from the Christian perspective? Like, why is that not allowed? Like you were talking about, everything has to be interpreted. Everything. I mean, think about, what does your pastor do on Sunday? Does your pastor just stand there and read the Bible to you? No, your pastor interprets it, teaches it to you, explains it to you. We do it with the Bible,
Exactly.
So yeah, of course, everything needs to be interpreted. But again, everybody's worldview is going to make its way into the media. And we're going to be learning something and picking up something, even if it isn't intentional. The director, the author, the writer of the story, they're portraying something. And they might not, they may realize it, it may be intentional, might not. So we're just understanding the themes behind it. And honestly, not looking to insult people, but it's really ignorant to say, no, you really shouldn't do that. Like, well, why not? We do it about everything else. And like, ultimately, like, your soul is at stake with the things that you consume. I mean, kids, the things that they're picking up from YouTube and TikTok and whatever. I mean, you're having something impressed upon you. Think about, I mean, the very name of these celebrities on social media, they're called influencers. Like, you can't get any better label than that. They want to influence you. So why can't we stem that? Why can't we be better influencers?
Amen to that. Yes, I think that's a very potent idea. I've enjoyed talking about this. We got to do it again, so we can
Absolutely.
Maybe next time we have you on the show, we can pick some particulars and hone in on that. Like, I'd like to do a fuller treatment of, because I talked a few years back about stoicism in The Walking Dead in a classroom discussion, and I liked that. And I've had a stoic on the show before, so we should pick a few movies or books or whatever, and just talk about that, because I think people would like to see it done in action.
Yeah.
So we'll collaborate on something. But I think for
like Steve Rogers in Captain America said, I could do this all day.
There you go. That's right. And you and me both, brother. So this has been great, and I appreciate everybody watching on Monday. If you have been, if you're not able to view the show live and send in questions, I just checked a minute ago. I didn't really see anything. I don't know if you can you see it on your end, Tim? Do you see anything?
I don't even have that open. It would just be too much of a distraction.
Yeah.
watching the scroll.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, I don't see anything, but you guys can always reach out to me or Tim. I'll have them tagged if you have questions or things you want to push back on. We're always here. Most of my guests are welcome to or agreeable in answering questions. So just reach out. We're both on Facebook, and are you on Twitter at all?
I am, but I just avoid it at all costs now.
Yeah,
because you get sucked in, and then that's it. So I'm like, that's one of the lines that I had to draw personally. Like, Facebook is fine. Twitter, I can't.
It's a nightmare sometimes. Yeah. Okay, good. Well, just so people know where they can find you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. Thanks again for coming on the show, Tim. This was fun.
It was my pleasure. I loved it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We'll see you next time, everybody.
All right. Take care.